Imagine being 22 years old and already standing at the very top of the basketball world. Imagine being faster than everyone, stronger than everyone, hungrier than everyone. Imagine hearing every reporter, every coach, every fan whispering the same thing. This is the future. This is the one. He wasn't just a player. He was a phenomenon. His speed was unreal, his explosiveness unmatched. He could slice through defenses like a knife through paper, rise into the air like gravity didn't exist, and finish with a power that made crowds erupt. People didn't just watch him play. They believed in him. They believed he was the savior who would bring glory back to his city, who would change the game forever. But here's the part nobody saw coming. The same gift that made him unstoppable would also become the reason he was destroyed. From the very beginning, his story was built on pressure. Growing up in the streets where survival meant running faster than danger, jumping higher than fear, playing harder than anyone else because tomorrow wasn't promised. Every game was more than a game. It was a fight for identity, for family, for survival. And when he made it to the big stage, that fight didn't stop. It only grew louder, heavier, more suffocating. The world didn't just want him to be great, they demanded it. Every night the crowd expected a miracle. Every night his coaches pushed him to do the impossible. Every night the weight on his shoulders grew heavier, and yet he delivered, over and over again. He became the youngest MVP in history. Headlines called him unstoppable. Analysts said he was destined to dominate for a decade. And fans fell in love with the idea that nothing could break him. But that's the thing about heroes. They look invincible, right up until the moment they're not. Because in sports, greatness comes with a price. The faster you move, the higher you jump, the harder you fall. And his fall was devastating. It was supposed to be just another game. The crowd was buzzing, the scoreboard was safe, the victory already in his team's hands. He didn't even need to be on the court anymore. But heroes, they don't walk away. He stayed. He fought for every second, every possession, even when the game was already won. That's who he was, relentless, fearless, unstoppable. Until one wrong step changed everything. In a split second, the arena's roar turned into silence, the kind of silence that feels like a nightmare. He grabbed his knee, pain written all over his face. Fans froze. Teammates stared in shock. Coaches held their breath. The prodigy who had been untouchable was suddenly broken on the floor. And in that instant, the future that had been so bright began to disappear. But here's the cruel part. That wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a tragedy that would drag on for years. Because he came back. Again and again, he came back. Surgery after surgery, rehab after rehab, sweat, pain, sacrifice. He rebuilt himself piece by piece, only to break again. Every comeback was met with hope. Every fall was met with heartbreak. Fans kept asking, will he ever be the same? And deep down, he kept asking himself the same question. And the truth is, no, he was never the same again. The explosiveness that once defined him, gone. The fearlessness that made him unstoppable, replaced by hesitation. The promise of a dynasty, of rings, of banners, of immortality, shattered. And the cruelest part? It wasn't his fault. He didn't quit. He didn't stop fighting. He didn't lose because of laziness or arrogance. He lost because his body betrayed him. And that's why his story hurts more than almost anyone else's. Because he wasn't just a star who faded. He was a star ripped out of the sky against his will before his time. The game didn't just move on without him. It robbed him. It robbed his fans. It robbed history itself. But ask yourself this, what's worse? To never have a chance at greatness, or to hold it in your hands, to taste it, to feel it, and then watch it slip away forever? That is the tragedy of Derrick Rose. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Because some people don't see him as a victim. Some people blame him. They say he was reckless. They say he pushed too hard. They say his downfall was inevitable. But was it? Or was he betrayed, not just by his body, but by the system that used him, drained him, and threw him away when he was broken? And this is where we need to pause. Because if you think this is just about one man's knees, you're missing the point. His story is a mirror. It's about what happens when talent is devoured by pressure, when a human being is treated like a machine, when destiny demands more than a body can give. His tragedy is bigger than basketball. It's the tragedy of every dreamer who learns that greatness always comes with a cost. But before you think you've heard the worst, remember this: his story isn't finished yet. Because even after the injuries, even after the falls, even after the world gave up on him, he didn't disappear. He kept fighting. He refused to let the game bury him. And in one unforgettable night, years after everyone thought he was finished, he gave us a performance that reminded the world exactly who he was. But that moment, that miracle comeback, is something we'll get to soon. Because before we talk about redemption, you need to understand just how deep the fall truly was.
Before the lights, before the headlines, before the fame, there was a kid, just a kid, running through cracked streets, dribbling a worn-out ball, chasing a dream that felt way too big for the neighborhood he came from. He didn't grow up surrounded by luxury. He grew up surrounded by noise, sirens, shouting, the chaos of a world that eats the weak and forgets the poor. But inside that noise, there was a rhythm. The rhythm of a ball bouncing on the concrete. The rhythm of a dream refusing to die. Every morning before the sun rose, he was on the court. And every night, long after the streetlights came on, he was still there. Rain, snow, pain, it didn't matter. He didn't play for fun. He played for survival. Because in a world where opportunities were rare, that ball was his only ticket out. People used to watch him move and say, he's different. He wasn't tall. He wasn't built like a monster. But when he played, it was like watching lightning wearing sneakers. The way he cut through defenders, the way he jumped, it wasn't natural. It was hunger turned into motion. It was desperation transformed into art. By the time he reached high school, the legend had already started. Crowds packed tiny gyms just to see him play. Opponents tried to double-team him, but it didn't matter. He wasn't just faster, he was smarter. Every move was a story. Every crossover was poetry. Coaches started whispering. Scouts started following. Everyone could feel it. Something special was happening. And yet, while everyone saw the talent, no one saw the pressure building inside him. Because when you come from nothing, success doesn't feel like joy. It feels like survival. Every win wasn't a celebration. It was proof that he was still alive, still fighting, still running away from the place that almost swallowed him whole. Then came the big moment. College scouts, cameras, interviews. The kid who once played on cracked concrete was suddenly playing under bright lights. The same hands that once trembled from cold were now shaking hands with legends. But deep down, he was still that kid from the block, scared, humble, and completely unaware of how fast everything was about to change. When he stepped onto a professional court for the first time, something shifted. The crowd's roar hit him like a wave. The lights were blinding. The moment was too big for most, but not for him. He smiled, because this was the dream, and he was living it. He wasn't just playing basketball anymore. He was rewriting it. His style was chaos with precision, beauty with violence. Every game felt like a highlight reel. Every dunk was an explosion. Every crossover made defenders look like ghosts. And soon the entire world was watching. Commentators couldn't believe it. Fans called him the chosen one. Coaches said they'd never seen anything like it. His name was on every headline, every screen, every kid's poster. He was the face of hope, the future of the game. But with every victory came a new weight. The fans wanted more. The sponsors wanted more. The coaches demanded more. He could feel his body screaming for rest, but how could he stop? He wasn't playing just to win. He was playing to prove that all the pain, all the sacrifice, all the nights he went hungry were worth it. He carried an entire city on his shoulders, a city that hadn't won in years, a city desperate for something or someone to believe in. Every time he stepped on the court, people didn't just see a player, they saw a savior. And that kind of expectation, it breaks people. But he didn't break. Not yet. In fact, he soared even higher. That year, he reached a level no one thought possible. His speed was otherworldly, his confidence unshakable. His name echoed through every corner of the sport. And then it happened, the crowning moment. He was named the youngest MVP in history, 22 years old and already standing among giants. The moment he lifted that trophy, the world stood still. Cameras flashed, teammates cheered, fans cried. It was a fairy tale written in real time. The kid from nowhere had become the king of everything. But the higher he climbed, the thinner the air became. Behind the smiles and celebrations, something darker began to form. Whispers that he was pushing too hard, that his playing style was too explosive, too dangerous. Doctors warned him, coaches worried, but he didn't listen. He couldn't, because slowing down felt like failure, and failure was not an option. Every game he played like it was his last. Every drive to the basket was a war. Every jump defied logic, and every time he landed, the world held its breath. Still, he refused to change. Because how do you tell a lion not to hunt? How do you tell a storm not to strike? Then came the season that changed everything. His team was unstoppable, and so was he. Every night was another masterpiece, another reminder that greatness doesn't wait for permission. But behind the highlights, behind the cheers, there were signs. Small moments of pain, little limps, quiet grimaces that fans ignored, but his body didn't. He would ice his knees after every game, telling reporters he was fine. He'd smile in interviews, hiding the truth that every step was starting to hurt. But heroes don't show pain. Heroes don't complain. They just keep going. And that's exactly what he did. Because he wasn't just playing for wins anymore. He was fighting for legacy. He wanted to be remembered as more than a name on a jersey. He wanted to be a symbol, a story. Proof that a kid from nowhere could conquer the world. But destiny has a cruel sense of timing. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how fast, how talented. There's always a moment when everything you've built trembles. And for him, that moment was closer than anyone could imagine. The stage was set for greatness. The world was watching. He had everything to lose, and he didn't even know it yet.
It started like any other season. The crowd, the cameras, the lights, all the same. But something about him was different. Maybe it was the weight of expectation. Maybe it was the whisper of pain in his body that he tried so hard to ignore. Or maybe it was destiny, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Every step, every sprint, every dunk carried more than energy. It carried fear. Not fear of losing. No, he wasn't afraid of that. What he feared was stopping. Because deep down, he knew that if he ever slowed down, if he ever took a break, everything might fall apart. The city needed him. The team needed him. The world needed him. But his body was begging for mercy. Teammates started noticing the limp. Trainers whispered about resting him. Reporters wrote pieces questioning his durability.
But every time someone suggested he take a game off, he'd shake his head and say, "I'm fine." He wasn't. But in his mind, pain was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. Behind the scenes, he was living in ice baths, his knees wrapped so tight that every step felt like walking on glass. He'd smile in interviews, crack jokes, hide the pain. But every jump took a piece of him. Every landing echoed through his body like a warning he refused to hear. And yet, on the court, he was still magic. The crowd didn't see the grimaces between plays, the silent prayers before every drive. They saw the dunks, the speed, the power, the illusion of invincibility. He had become so good at pretending that even the universe began to believe him. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. Some nights, the pain wouldn't go away. Some mornings, his legs felt heavy, unresponsive. He'd stand in front of the mirror and tell himself, "You're good, you're strong, keep going." It was a lie, but it was the only way to keep the dream alive. Pressure became poison. Coaches started pushing harder. "We need you to carry us." Fans expected miracles. Sponsors demanded perfection. Everyone around him saw him as a symbol, not a human being. And he accepted it. Because when you grow up fighting for everything, you learn to bleed quietly. The city that once celebrated him had turned him into an expectation machine. Every game he played was no longer about joy. It was about survival. Every win wasn't satisfaction. It was relief. Every loss wasn't disappointment. It was shame. And then came that game. The one that would change everything. It was spring. The atmosphere was electric. His team was ahead in the playoffs, and everything was finally going right. The dream was alive again. People said this was his redemption season. He was stronger, smarter, more mature. The world had forgiven his past injuries, believing the nightmare was over. But fate doesn't forget. From the first minute, you could feel the intensity. The arena shook with every cheer. Every time he touched the ball, the crowd rose to its feet. He was in control, cutting, spinning, leaping, unstoppable. It felt like the old days, like the magic was back. But behind every explosive move, his body screamed louder. His mind told him to slow down. His heart refused. Late in the game, victory was already secured. The lead was safe. The clock was running out. He could have rested. He could have walked off, smiled, and let the crowd celebrate. But heroes, they don't walk away. Heroes finish what they start. He drove to the basket one more time. Just one more. The moment replayed 1,000 times in slow motion for years after. The quick step, the plant, the rise, and then the silence. Not the kind of silence that fills space, but the kind that swallows it whole. He fell, hard. The crowd gasped, teammates froze. He grabbed his knee, eyes wide, pain written across his face. The camera zoomed in, capturing the moment the dream cracked. Trainers rushed in. The arena was dead quiet. Somewhere in the stands, a fan whispered, "Please, not again." He tried to get up. He couldn't. He tried to stand. His leg gave out. The look on his face said everything. He knew. Before the doctors, before the diagnosis, before the tests, he knew. Because when you've given your soul to something, you can feel when it's taken away. They carried him off the court that night. Cameras caught every tear, every grimace, every forced smile. The commentators' voices cracked as they tried to describe what the world was witnessing. They called it tragedy. But for him, it was more than tragedy. It was betrayal. His own body had turned against him. And the cruelest part? This wasn't the first time. It was just the worst time. Back in the locker room, the reality hit. He sat there, surrounded by silence. The crowd still cheering outside, oblivious to what had just ended. His hands trembled as he pulled the towel over his head. Reporters waited for answers, but what could he say? "I'm fine?" He had said that too many times before. That night, the city went quiet. The replays looped endlessly. The fall, the pain, the disbelief. Fans stayed up refreshing their screens, praying for good news, but deep down, everyone knew. This wasn't just an injury. This was a nightmare reborn. Days turned into weeks, and the truth came out. Torn ligaments, surgery again, months, maybe years of recovery. The headlines were brutal. The rise and fall of a prodigy. The body that couldn't keep up with greatness. Everyone had something to say, except him. While the world debated, he disappeared. Into the shadows, into the rehab rooms, into the endless cycle of pain and recovery. Cameras moved on. The league found new stars. The same reporters who once called him unstoppable now used words like fragile. But what they didn't understand is that he wasn't fragile. He was human. And humanity isn't weakness. It's what makes his story unforgettable. He trained alone for months, in silence. No cameras, no headlines, just pain, sweat, and the echo of a dream trying to survive. Every time he touched the ball, he could feel the fear of falling again, the fear of never being who he was. But even fear couldn't stop him. Because deep inside, something still burned. Not the same fire of ambition, but a smaller, quieter flame. The flame of someone who refuses to disappear. And that's where the real story begins. Not in the rise, not in the fall, but in the moments after the fall, when the world turns away and you're left alone with your thoughts, your pain, and your reflection. That's where greatness is truly tested. But before redemption comes the reckoning, and for him, the reckoning was far from over.
It was months since that night. The crowd's roar had faded into memory, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights in a lonely gym. No cameras, no headlines, just him, and the sound of a basketball echoing off cold walls. He moved slower now. Each step was deliberate, each jump cautious. But inside, something was different. The same kid who once played for the world was now playing for himself. The world thought it was over, that he'd never come back, that his story had ended the night his knee gave out. But stories like his don't end in pain. They pause in it. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. Every day was the same. Wake up, ice, stretch, lift, shoot, repeat. No cameras, no fans, no cheers, just him and the echo of who he used to be. Some days he'd break down in the middle of a drill, clutching his leg, whispering to himself, "Why?" But then he'd remember the beginning, the cracked court, the dawn light, the dream that refused to die. He'd stand up, wipe his face, and start again. Every rep was a war, every drop of sweat a declaration of rebellion. Months passed. The pain didn't vanish. It just became part of him. He learned to coexist with it, like a scar that no longer hurt, but still told a story. And as the body healed, so did the mind. Slowly, quietly. People stopped talking about him. New stars rose. The game moved on. But somewhere in the shadows, He was building something far more powerful than fame. Purpose. He didn't want to be the kid everyone cheered for anymore. He wanted to be the man who stood up after everyone stopped watching. And one morning, before the sun even touched the city, he walked back onto the court, alone, hoodie up, head down, the same place it all began. The ball hit the concrete, thump, thump, thump. The sound was music again. He wasn't chasing headlines anymore. He was chasing peace. For hours he practiced. Layups, mid-range shots, free throws, jumpers, again and again. Not for applause, not for cameras, but for himself. Every shot was redemption, each miss a lesson. He was no longer proving the world wrong. He was proving himself right. And then one day, someone filmed him. A grainy clip appeared online. He's back. The internet went crazy. Fans who had forgotten suddenly remembered. Comment sections exploded. He looks different. He looks stronger. He looks free. The video went viral overnight. And just like that, the world that had moved on came running back. Offers came, calls from teams, journalists wanting interviews. Everyone wanted the comeback story. But this time, he didn't rush. He didn't jump into the spotlight. He stayed quiet, training in silence, until the day came when he felt ready. Not perfect, just ready. The night of his return was unlike any other. The arena lights burned brighter than before, the crowd louder, every seat filled, banners waving, the sound of his name echoing again after so long. He stood at the entrance tunnel, eyes closed, breathing slow, hands shaking, not from fear, but from gratitude. The same kid who once played to escape, now played to belong. When he stepped onto the court, time froze. The noise disappeared. It was just him, the ball, and the floor beneath his feet. He dribbled once, twice, and for a moment, it felt like the first time again. The whistle blew. The game began. Every movement was measured, every cut controlled. The crowd held its breath each time he jumped. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't running from pain. He was dancing with it. And then came the moment. Final quarter, tie game, 10 seconds left. The ball found him. He could have passed. He could have played it safe, but safety never made legends. He took a deep breath, one dribble, stepped back. The defender's hand rose, too late. The ball left his fingertips, spinning through the air like destiny itself. Swish. Silence. Then eruption. The arena exploded. The sound was deafening. The crowd chanted his name like it had never stopped. Teammates mobbed him, lifting him in celebration. Cameras flashed. Commentators screamed. But he didn't hear any of it. Because in that moment, the noise didn't matter. The score didn't matter. The game didn't matter. What mattered was that he did it. Not for fame, not for validation, but for the kid who once played under broken lights with nothing but hope. Tears filled his eyes as he looked up at the rafters, the lights blinding him. For the first time in years, he smiled. Not the smile of victory, but of peace. That night, he walked out of the arena long after everyone else had gone home. He didn't carry a trophy. He didn't need one. The real victory was standing up again.
The world would talk about the shot, the comeback, the stats. But what they'd never understand was that his greatest triumph wasn't what happened on the court. It was what happened within. Because greatness isn't about how high you climb. It's about how deep you rise after falling. And as he stepped into the night, city lights reflecting in his eyes, he whispered to himself, "This time, I'm free." The game will move on. Records will fade. Names will change. But stories like his, they never die. They live in every kid who picks up a ball believing they can turn pain into purpose, failure into fire. He didn't just come back to play. He came back to remind the world that you can break and still be whole. And maybe, just maybe, that's what true victory looks like.
The lights have faded. The echoes of cheers now linger like ghosts in the rafters. The arena is empty, but something greater remains. Silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than victory. He stands at midcourt, eyes closed, breathing in that silence like it's the first clean breath after years underwater. Because for the first time, he isn't chasing anything. He's found it. You see, this isn't just a story about basketball. It's about everything that breaks and heals us, about how the things that destroy us can also build us, if we let them. Every scar, every setback, every whispered doubt becomes part of a bigger design. And in that design, pain isn't the enemy, it's the teacher. When he fell, the world laughed. When he cried, the world moved on. But when he stood up, no one was watching. That's how real transformation happens. In the dark, when no one's clapping, when no one believes, that's when you find out who you really are. The kid who once played to prove everyone wrong had become a man who no longer needed to prove anything at all. The applause used to be his oxygen. Now, peace is. And that's the thing the world doesn't understand. True greatness has nothing to do with noise. It's born in silence, raised in pain, and perfected in purpose. He doesn't walk the same way anymore. His stride isn't about dominance, it's about balance. Every step echoes with the sound of everything he survived. Every breath carries the weight of every moment he thought he couldn't go on, and did anyway. He's no longer the boy who fell. He's the man who rose. Because sometimes the game gives you glory, and sometimes it gives you lessons. The world measures success in trophies, points, and contracts. But real success, it's measured in how you treat yourself when the lights go out, when the cameras stop, when no one's cheering your name. And maybe that's why his story hits different, because deep down, we've all been him. We've all fallen, we've all broken, we've all had moments when it felt like the dream was slipping through our fingers. But like him, we have a choice: stay down or rise again. That's what separates the legend from the lost. Not luck, not talent, but the decision to stand up one more time, even when the world expects you to stay on the ground. He didn't come back to relive the past, he came back to rewrite it, to show that failure isn't the end, it's just the beginning of something more honest. When you lose what you thought defined you, you finally discover who you really are. He realized that the kid who used to dream on a cracked court under streetlights wasn't gone. He had just been waiting for him to remember why he started. Not for fame, not for approval, but for love. The kind of love that doesn't need a scoreboard. That's the truth we forget. Somewhere between ambition and expectation, between the cheers and the critics, we lose the joy. But he found it again, in the rhythm of a bounce,
in the quiet of a sunrise practice, in the peace of a single shot swishing through the net. Because sometimes coming full circle isn't about ending where you started. It's about starting again, this time with eyes open. The media called it a comeback, but it wasn't. It was an awakening. The difference is simple. A comeback is about proving you're still good enough. An awakening is about realizing you always were. The pain didn't take away his greatness, it revealed it. That's why his story will never die, because it isn't just about him, it's about everyone who's ever been told you'll never be the same. He proved that you can lose your speed, your strength, even your spotlight. But as long as your heart keeps beating, your story isn't over. And that's the message. You are not your injuries. You are not your failures. You are not your lowest moment. You are what you do after. He didn't win because he scored again. He won because he refused to let pain define him. He turned it into power, into poetry, into purpose. And maybe that's why years from now, when people tell his story, they won't talk about stats or trophies. They'll talk about courage, about faith, about the strength it takes to stand up again when the world has already walked away. Because that's what heroes do. Not in movies, not in headlines, but in real life. They fall, they break, they disappear, and then, quietly, they rise. The shot will fade from memory. The games will be replaced, but that moment, when he looked up at the lights and smiled through the pain, that will live forever. Because it wasn't just his redemption, it was ours. We all carry a version of that story inside us. Maybe not on a court, but in our own lives. And just like him, one day we'll have to make that same choice. To stand again, to keep moving, to find meaning in the wreckage. And when we do, we'll remember, you don't need to be whole to shine. You just need to keep showing up. He reminded the world that broken doesn't mean finished. It means human. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all. So if you ever find yourself in the dark, wondering if it's too late, remember him, the one who fell, the one who rose, the one who learned that real greatness isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking beautifully. And as the lights go out and the echoes fade, one truth remains. Legends aren't made by how high they fly, but by how often they learn to rise again. Because somewhere, right now, there's another kid dribbling a ball on a cracked court, dreaming the same dream. And if he listens closely, he'll hear it, the heartbeat of a story that never truly ended, just began again.